Hello, I am Dick Rice, Director of Spiritual Development at The Retreat, a 12-step recovery center in Wayzata, Minnesota, and a long-time 12-stepper myself. I landed on the first step back on May 1st, 1979, so in a sense I guess I'm older than dirt in the program. But today, for me and maybe for you as well, this is my only day of recovery. I'd like to invite you to climb the steps with me through these next 12 presentations that you and I will have together. I begin with the first step. We admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. That, as I said, is the first step of the remarkable staircase that begins the 12 steps. Those steps created by Bill W., Dr. Bob, and friends almost 80 years ago that have made such a difference for so many of us. I would say the best and only way that humans have found to deal with the insidious illnesses of alcoholism and addiction since the beginning of time. We climb the first step. Better yet, we land on the first step. That's how I found the steps. I joined a club that I would have had no interest in joining otherwise, but after 2 failed interventions with an alcoholic in my family, I landed hard on the fact that I was powerless over this person's alcoholism. I have a propensity for depression. I was getting more and more depressed. A friend of mine finally convinced me to try Al-Anon before I checked myself into a psych ward at a local hospital. On May 1st, 1979, I walked into the doors of Al-Anon, and that has made all the difference for me ever since. We admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. In this series, I'm going to tease out a couple of words from each of the steps and speak of those with you succinctly, briefly, I hope cogently for you. The 2 that I'd like to speak of are the very first word, we, and that word, powerless. Let me speak to the second first, because it really makes all the difference. In our American culture and in the world of sociology and politics, people as diverse as Max Weber and John Kenneth Galbraith, when they've written or spoken about the word power, what they speak of is the imposition of my will on your behavior. That is typically the way, especially the masculine world, thinks about power, with the result that many of us think that we are much more powerful in other people's lives than we really are, or we give other people much more power than they really deserve. We're inundated with people saying things like, I got all of them to come. I put out a Twitter and they all responded. That response was theirs. All I could do was put out the Twitter. It was no credit of mine that 120 people showed up. Or we say, that boss really irritates me. Or that traffic jam this morning really threw me into a tizzy. No, they didn't. I'm the one that was thrown into a tizzy. I'm not a victim of that boss or of that traffic jam. I have the choice to do whatever I'm going to do with the circumstances that I find in life. You and I each have the power of one. That's what the word power means. It comes from the Latin, sum, posse, I am able. We have the power of one. In the first step, landing on the first step, and landing hard usually on the first step, we acknowledge we are powerless over alcohol. We can no longer control it, or whatever our addiction might be, or whoever it might be that we're trying to control. We are powerless over them. We surrender. In surrendering, the victory begins. That's a paradox, very difficult to understand except in the living. So don't yet try to get your mind around it. We are powerless over alcohol. When we land on that first step, our victory is going to begin in that very admission of defeat. And the more deeply we accept the fact that we have been defeated by alcohol, the more likely our climb for the rest of the steps. The second word that I'd like to speak to is that first word of the first step. We admitted. That is particularly inspiring, I submit. A number of years ago, I had the chance to teach a graduate course in spirituality at Creighton University in Omaha. And at the end of the class, on the last day of this 6-week session, I turned to the group and said, what has struck you as most important in what we've done with the 12 steps? And a woman in the front row raised her hand and immediately said, what strikes me is that the most important word is the first word of the first step, we. And all of our hands went down. We had to agree with her. If this were simply an I program, the 12 steps would not exist. Alcohol would be as rampant as it always has been. But it's a we program. It's not a self-help program. It's not even a program. It's a community of people, sponsor with sponsee, presenter with listeners, community with community, all of us helping each other. We make it with more than a little graced help from our friends. We've begun the climb in landing on the first step. I hope you'll join me for the rest of the climb. Thank you.